don't be so stressed. Yes, you could go back to Microsoft, you could go, do these other things, you can Oracle, I had a few offers. But really do what you think will be fun and you're passionate about, and don't worry so much that you're closing all the doors. He said, no door is ever closed. You can always go back to it. You may have to work a little harder. He literally said, if you want to go back into lower level network, kernel development, you're probably going to have to read some books and convince some people that's really what you're passionate about. But don't think that any door is ever closed. And I think just keep moving forward with that kind of attitude. And I think that really helped me. And I try to share that with other people who are so stressed when I see them over decisions where they're both good options. It's like, don't stress that much over it.
Sabrina, let's talk a little bit about life and sort of key decisions or crossroads that you've been at in your life. And, a lot of our members really look up to leaders like you, and they'd love to learn like how you went through these decisions, how you thought about it, what, how you framed it in terms of your professional career, in your personal career, your family, finances, money, all of that. So, would love to hear about one of those that you think was a key crossroads for you.
I would say growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, I grew up in a very highly technical family. So, my dad has a PhD in electrical engineering. My mom has a master's in mathematics because they didn't have computer science then. But she was a very deep technical, lower level networking protocol engineer. And so for me, studying computer science was kind of the default path. And when I graduated from college, it was interesting what kind of role I might take. I had interned at Microsoft and at startups, but all of a sudden I kind of wanted to branch out and do something different. And this is why I actually looked at a job that was in a software group of a consulting firm, which I thought just offered a little bit more richness in terms of business and exposure. But I was also very nervous about it because as a computer science major, that's not the deeply technical arena. What am I going to do? And, that was definitely a point where, my dad gave me some advice and looking at, because I was very stressed about it. Should I do this? Should I not? He was just like, don't be so stressed. Yes, you could go back to Microsoft. You could go, do these other things. You can Oracle. I had a few offers. But really do what you think will be fun and you're passionate about. And don't worry so much that you're closing all the doors. He said, no door is ever closed. You can always go back to it. You may have to work a little harder. He literally said, if you want to go back into lower level network, kernel development, you're probably going to have to read some books and convince some people that's really what you're passionate about. But don't think that any door is ever closed. And I think just keep moving forward with that kind of attitude. And I think that really helped me. And I try to share that with other people who are so stressed when I see them over decisions where they're both good options. It's like, don't stress that much over it.
That's a beautiful phrase, which is, no door is ever closed. You've got to work hard, but it'll eventually open up again. Are there, as you got further in life, were there other crossroads like this where you had to think about, what big decisions to make? Like kind of going from Google to Pinterest was a pretty big change. You were so successful at Google and you were there for so long.
That was, I would say, even before that, though, when I think about you mentioned career, life, family. I would say on the family front, people often ask me, they say, oh, professional woman, do you think you can do it all? Can people do it all? And I said, my answer is no, in my experience, not as an individual. And so you have to think about it as kind of the team, the family team. And I remember when our kids, my kids now are 22 and 18, my little people have grown up, but I remember when they were 6 and 3, maybe 3 and 7, that kind of range. We were kind of overwhelmed. My husband and I were feeling like we each maybe had 1.5 jobs and we had the kids, and we were lucky. We have so much family around. My mom took care of them 5 days ago. I was very blessed to have all of that. But it was still very challenging. We didn't feel like we were kind of giving them the parenting that we wanted. So we really looked at our situation at that point, and I was loving my job. I think at that point I was a VP at Yahoo and running Yahoo Mail and traveling and managing people around the world. My husband was also a senior director at HP, managing people around the world. And we were just struggling with balancing it all. So we made the decision where I loved my job. My husband's always liked his job, but he felt like he should probably do more for community, for society. So he actually quit his job and moved into education nonprofit in a role that allowed him more flexibility. He always says that when we all learned how to work from home in the COVID pit, he'd done it for a decade. Right. So that for our family was the right decision, but it was a big decision for us to make. And so, but I think it was great for us. We feel like now our kids have both, moved on to college, and now my daughter graduated from college, my son's in college, but we feel like it was the right decision for our family.
But going back to at that point of time, like how did you and your husband think about like on the family side, obviously this was really good. But from a career point of view and the aspirations you had for yourselves for the long term, and also very importantly, like, this would mean a change in terms of the finances, the amount of money that come into the family. And so how do you think of your P&L as the little team that you were working on?
Well, so my husband and I met in business school, and you have to know that my husband, yeah, he goes by the philosophy that all things in life can be solved with a spreadsheet. And so, I mean, anything we're talking about, like, oh, we're overwhelmed, whatever. He's like, all right, let's make a spreadsheet and let's figure out all the things that we're doing in life and what are the things that we really want to be doing and what are the things that we don't think are as fun. How do we outsource them? That's kind of how our attitude. Same thing here. If we felt like this wasn't working, let's build a spreadsheet. Let's look at the options and let's think about what could work. And for us, it worked for us, but we needed to actually run the numbers and make sure that it did. So yes, a couple of MBAs, we were able to actually look at that, project it out. He's always, he's got all these scenario analysis, things like that. I mean, look, he also, when I say Excel, he also at HP was in a strategic planning and modeling team, doing a lot of supply chain analysis as well. So he's a power Excel user, so that helped a lot.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Is this something that you do a lot? Like, do you guys like have a spreadsheet that you maintain? We've had other guests on the podcast where, one of our guests, she talked about how she and her husband have this thing they call the Trackernator. And they don't look at it often, but once a year, they look at the Trackernator and try to make sure, like, all the numbers. They're also a business school couple in many ways. And so that all the things are right and they're still on track and which scenario has a higher probability of landing. Do you guys do that, or was it just a one-time kind of an exercise?
We've got a lot of like long-term models, things like that running. I think at this point, look, it is true our spending is low compared to our earning. And so at this point, my husband is also deemed, okay, here's where it's just not worth the mind share. And so you don't need to worry about those things. It's above this level that we need to look at the numbers and actually make decisions. He was also a McKinsey guy. So he's got both McKinsey and the analytics in there. And so it's like 80-20 and what are the things that you actually need to build that modeling for?
What were the thoughts that were going on in your mind? Did you feel more pressure at that point? Like, because, you went from 2 high earning income to 1 and 1 person, like, was there like, you just had to like, keep the profession going at a very high rate?
A mix there. I would say, yes, I did feel more pressure, but there's always the understanding that our earning potential was exactly the same.
That's actually a great way to put it, yeah.
And so knowing that and knowing that, I think all of these things, back to even that initial thing and we're saying no door is ever closed, a lot of these decisions, they're for now. And that's what I tell people a lot too. It was when our kids were 3, 6, 7, kind of age, kind of 3 to 7. Then when you actually, it's just for that. It's for that phase. Don't feel like these decisions are forever. Because I think that's where people get really overwhelmed. When you think about this is forever, I've got this pressure know that it's a short-term decision that you're making the right for that time for you and that team at that point in time. But also if things go wrong or if things change, what's your potential? Like what could you do then? Understanding that either of us could actually find a reasonable job that could actually support the family.
Do you guys tend to, like, did you, as you went through your life in your career, did you tend to think longer term and try to plan out your career? Like, did you say, like, in 5 years, I'm going to do this, and that, in 10 years, I'm going to be X, Y, Z?
People ask me that a lot, especially people who are younger, earlier in their career. They're like, okay, I want to be where you are. So what's your plan? What did you do?
What do you do exactly?
They're like, what did you plan? And I was like, absolutely not. I didn't. I mean, look, I understand that I actually had a very privileged upbringing. I was very lucky. My parents were very generous with their support. So, and I recognize that now because that enabled me to operate and make choices the way that I did. Um, I've had the freedom to actually choose in my career the things that just I'm passionate about and that would make me happy. And so each time, here's one thing that I did in my career. I don't know if you know this. Actually, I until this last decision to go to Pinterest, I've never had a job when I took another job. Each time along the way, I've actually quit my existing job first. And then I've actually explored. I treat them as two different decisions. I think there's one thing when you're looking at your current job. Do you love it? Are you super happy? Is this everything you want? If not, what would it take to be there? And you look at and you know what? Figure out how you get there. You got to ask for it. You got to change things, whatever it is. And I think that's where I've always stayed engaged because I keep looking at that. And then when you get to a point where whether it's for you or the role itself, it's just time to move on, then I say, put a fork in me, I'm done. And then I quit. And then I actually, it's a whole nother decision of what I want to do next. And it's very empowering. It's very surprising for the child of Chinese immigrants to make decisions this way. I think a lot of that I actually credit my husband. He's always given me the confidence to make decisions like this. His answer to me is like, look, to be honest, you could find another job in like an hour. I feel very lucky to say that with all the experience I've gained. He's like, it may not be something you like. That's important, but at least know that as you're moving forward, that you have those options. You've built up all these skills. You have those things. So now take those and figure out what you're passionate about. And I really love having the experience of just having that whiteboard, talking to people, learning about what they're doing, trying those things on for size. I feel like I've hit you up and when I've done this probably internally at Google because I've done that even internally at companies. But that's kind of how I've chosen what to do next.
But I thought earlier part of your answer, you were overly humble because you've been so incredibly successful at like building great products and building great businesses and teams. What were the core principles that you sort of led you through those things? I mean, yes, we're all privileged, but at the same time, you also like really, in a way, built on that base and built an incredible career. So what were the principles that guided you as you went through each of your roles and jobs? Like, how did you sort of know you were doing well? How did you motivate yourself?
Mm. I mean, I think there's a couple of things. There's one when you think about the product, and I have pretty much worked in consumer products for most of my career. So on that front, I feel like it's very simplistic to say, but really focus on the user of your product. For us, actually at Pinterest, we call them pinners even, because you just got to understand what their lives are. And that I've become more humble through the years because I think if you're building consumer products, you have to, in the beginning, you're building your feature and you're like, this is so great. They must love it. They're going to want it. And it's like, no, they're very busy people. They are trying to do everything from get through school to, raising their families to all of these things. What is it that I've earned the right for their mind share? That's the way I tend to think about it now. So product wise, that's something I really think about is how are we building things that are better so that we can fit and we deserve to be part of people's lives. When I think about what the right roles are for me and actually what I advise other people are, I think it's really important to know what your superpower is. What is it that if you're in that moment that your people would know you for, they describe that you're really good at? Ideally, it's something you really like doing. Most people it is. I've met a couple people where I'm like, that's your superpower. They're like, yeah, I don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, we got to work on that. But almost everybody, your superpower is something that you shine at, you're happiest. So once you've identified that, I say look for roles that are really important for whatever organization and where the key to success is actually being really good at that superpower. So for me at Google, a lot of it was bringing together a lot of different, I would say, disparate organizations, people, so that they can unify under one vision and then really inspire them and execute and build something great, right? And so I'm very determined when I do things, and I will kind of, I don't have a playbook. A lot of times people ask me, what's their playbook? I'm very adaptable. And I look at the situation, I'm like, what's it going to take to get to point B that I think is the right thing for us to get to? Then I will do whatever it takes. Oh, that team needs more encouragement there. That team, needs more organization there. I'll just adapt because that's what it needs. But that's kind of how I tend to look at things. And I look for situations where I might be able to contribute.
What superpower are you using now at Pinterest?
Walking into Pinterest, there are a few different reasons I came, by the way. One of the things, I love Google. And this is why Google was the first time where I had a job when I took another job. Because I was at Google. I was in between roles, though, and I was thinking about what I wanted to do next. So I was kind of wasn't fully ingrained into a role when Pinterest, the opportunity came along. I loved Google, loved all the people there, learned so much. But the difference at Pinterest, and this kind of drives me to what I'm doing, is that one, the CEO, Bill, I think you know him, is I think a very strong leader, and I felt like I could learn from him. The other is the product opportunity and the passion around it, the passion that Bill had. This is the opportunity for us to build a positive place on the internet. And not only that, it is a place where right now it's predominantly women, probably 2/3, but actually that's expanding as well into kind of men's fashion, things like that. They're inspired there, and 8 out of 10 of them they're happier after using the product. Like, there's almost no other product that can say that. And I feel like if we do that, we put that out there, we promote it, we promote metrics to even measure that, I think we can really kind of change the measurement that people are thinking and that people are building their products towards. Not just Pinterest. We want to build Pinterest to be top of that, but other social sites understanding that and starting to measure that and building that way. That's something I want to do.
To wrap this up, I wanted to kind of, one of the questions I love asking people who come on the podcast is, what advice would you give to yourself, like, when you were, say, 10 years back or 20 years back? If there was a message you could send to yourself, what would that be?
It's actually consistent with a lot of the themes that I share with others. It's a little bit of, don't stress over it that much. Each decision that you're really stressing over, you're just absolutely convinced that there's somehow a right choice and a wrong choice. A lot of the paths turn out okay. And sometimes things turn out in ways that you hadn't hoped for, that you wish didn't, but I think you got to let those go and just move on. I'll give you an example. I was at a startup before I joined Google. It was called Cosmics, and really bright people, really enjoyed it, but also felt like probably wasn't the right place for me to contribute my superpower, in that I looked at the company and it was really about related entities and data mining. And I felt like that was the strength of the company. They'd brought me in to work on more of a consumer product, but I'm like, what? I don't think that's the key to this company. It's more that you need a massive data set for you to process on some of the underlying technology. So I decided to leave. When I left, I actually ended up I had like, I think, can't remember, like 60 or maybe 60 days to decide whether I wanted to exercise my options. And at that point in time, and you run all the numbers, and is this company going to be in the money or not for me? Because at that point, I had to put in 6 figures to actually exercise my options. I decided not to. And I believe 4 weeks after that, Cosmics was acquired. They've never announced the overall by Walmart to start Walmart Labs for a substantial amount that I definitely would have been in the money. And it ended up that I missed it by like 4 weeks. So is that I was upset for a few days, but I was kind of like, you know what? I ended up at Google. I met wonderful people like you. I think I learned a ton, developed my career a lot. Things happen, and you can't kind of always be so stressed about each decision and what coulda, shoulda, would have been. I think it's more important to kind of look forward where you're at. Are you enjoying it? And those things are going to happen. There's a lot of luck in life, and you got to let it go.
Sabrina, you're an incredible leader. You're also an incredible woman leader at a tech company. and it's something that we all care deeply about increasing the diversity of our companies, and especially making tech a much nicer, more warm place for women to be in. What do you have to say to like younger leaders, men, women, on how do we do all of that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to think about. I think first is recognize that diversity will help you build better products. And I think organizations run better. I think having those diverse perspectives, it's one of those things where there's research that now quantitatively even shows it. So I want to make sure that people understand that at its core. One thing that I have seen, and I call it Sabrina's rule of three. They named it Sabrina's rule of three when I was actually sharing it at Google. Um, is that I do think that there is a minimum of three when you're looking at any underrepresented group. What I found is when you're the only one, and I have been, like when I first joined the Android leadership team, I would count actually. I'd be like, 27 people in the room, I'm the only woman. 30 people in the room, I'm the only woman. And it was interesting when you're looking at things like working on camera, where none of the guys even took pictures. And I was like, why are you leading this? You need more people. I take so many selfies, right? It's just, I think I've made you take a selfie with me. It's You need the people who are really enjoying the product in different ways to share their perspectives. So what I find is that if you're the one, you're the only. And also, often you get these questions of, Sabrina, what would women think about that? Sabrina, what would Asians think about that? And you're like, I don't know. I don't know that I can represent billions of people. The funny thing is, when there are two, everybody thinks you're best friends. Oh, you and Denise, I'm on a board and where there's two, and it's like, oh, you and Denise, do you hang out all the time? I'm like, I like Denise, but we're not best friends. But there is this assumption that you're best friends and you're connected in some way. It's not until you get to a minimum of three that somehow you can actually be different, but also have enough disparity in the group. And so I encourage anyone who is running teams, who are thinking about it, try to create that scenario. I think I've actually thought about asking some of my friend who's a sociology professor. I'm like, you got to run this study. Someone told me that there is research that shows this, but this has been my experience. And as I've shared it with others, there's a lot of nodding and a lot of people that feel this as well. So when you're thinking about building teams, when you're thinking about organizations, don't stop at one, don't stop at two. Make sure that you're at least getting to three, so those individuals feel like they've got a community, but also individuality.
That is so actionable. I love it. Absolutely love it, because it's it makes total sense, and it's very, very clear and actionable. That's very helpful. So that is super helpful, and especially as someone thinking about organizations and building teams, and we've tried very hard to make Arta as diverse as possible.
It's interesting too, because I think people who are often really invested in diversity and they want it, what they tend to do is to look at it and spread the people across the organization. I think that's the other thing I tend to look at is maybe that's not the right thing for the individuals who are in the more minority group. It might be better to have one team have three people and three other teams to have none. And I know, like in my daughter's college CS program, she even now today at Rice University, it's still predominantly male. Or she noticed actually in some underrepresented minority groups, she noticed that the school purposely will create sections where one might have three Black students and one might have none, because it's not about for everybody else that they get the diversity. It's for those people to feel like they've got a community. And so I think that's one thing to think about.
Okay, let's change tracks a little bit from career, and thank you so much for giving us some actionable stuff on diversity, to talking a little bit about money. And I know you're really into philanthropy, so I want to get into that. But before I get into that, like, how do you think about money? Like, a lot of people, especially those of us who come from tech, have different ways of thinking about money, and often don't want to think about it or have a weird historical background and baggage around it. So how do you think about money?
It's this mixture. I think I did grow up in an environment where my parents did come to the United States with essentially nothing, right? I mean, the only way they could come to the United States they were born in China, grew up in Taiwan, but the only way they could come to the United States for graduate school was just whatever school would give them the most scholarship money. And they had kind of one way. My mom came by plane. My dad said that in his family, the girls got to come by plane, and then the boys had to come by boat. So he came by boat from Taiwan. It did not enough to go back, right? This is kind of they met at graduate school, actually University of Pennsylvania. So it was just that was their way. So I definitely grew up in an environment where it's like, okay, remember everything you have, you're lucky to have this. We didn't have this, and that would definitely still, I think I'm pretty frugal in that way. And I just, so money for me is something where I understand we have enough now, and that provides the security. But I'm a mix in that I went to business school, so I kind of understand a lot of the dynamics, and I've tried different things myself, by the way. Here's the magic of it all. I decided one day that I was going to build a bond ladder. So I did this, and this is back in, a very poor time, because I built a bond ladder where one of the bonds, because I just picked AAA rated bonds, and I was like, I'm going to do everything I learned in like finance class, and I'm actually going to build my own bond ladder. Yet one of them was Lehman. And this is in 2007 to the financial, and one of my rungs on my bond ladder all of a sudden one day went to zero. It was a AAA rated bond, and I was like, crap. So that actually, I was like, okay, finally I'm taking the reins and actually getting involved in using everything that I learned in business school. And it just turned out very poorly. So that was one thing where I think I didn't really look at the macro environment of what was happening. It happened fast though, too, right?
Yeah, it was sudden. I mean,
The Big Short, the movie came out later. I missed that story when we were living it. So
I was going to say there are people who are doing it professionally with teams of hundreds of people who got that wrong. So I don't think you should beat yourself up on that.
But it is surprising to one day open up your accounts and be like, oh, that rung is zero now. And so my ladder didn't really work. I think after that, I was kind of like, you know what? That took me a bunch of mind share to actually set all that up and then watch it and things like that. In the end, I just decided I don't think I want to be that involved. Even if I've actually done this, where I really have my passion is building consumer products. And I think that's where I want to put my mind share. I did struggle because I had enough background that I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to have somebody else manage my money, I need to find somebody who I find who knows more than me, is smarter than me, and that I really, really trust. And that combination ended up kind of hard for me to find. So in the end, actually, my money is managed by my business school roommate. So she is brilliant. I mean, heck, I watched her. She's like a Princeton engineering grad, went to Stanford Business School with me. And she also, founded companies and all of these things. But her lifestyle was her husband's a law firm partner. They had 3 children. It was very hard for her to keep starting up companies and running things. So she actually got a financial planning license, and she's brilliant, and I trust her. And so that's kind of how I've managed for the last, I don't know, 10 years or more.
No, that's fantastic. But I know you and your husband put a lot of time into philanthropy and specific, and have a method around it. Would love for you to talk about it if you're okay with it.
Yeah, I talked earlier about our family making this team decision where I really love my job. My husband, I think, has always felt like he needs to give back to society and kind of do something for the greater good. So one of the things that we looked at as well is we do make more money than we need. And so each year, and we created a family DAF, a donor advised fund. And each year we look back at the prior year. So we don't want to kind of put a stress on financials and risk for us going forward. And that's why we try to think about this way. This is money we've already earned. How much of that are we comfortable then putting into the staff? And that increases, and we decide together what we're going to put in. And one of the things about donor advised funds, I think a lot of people are using them as kind of this tax haven, right? Because it is considered, you get a tax break for putting it in there. And then they're actually just parking it there. So for us, what we do is we give away 100% of that DAF every year. So my husband finds good organizations that he researches them, things that he feels like he believes in and they're well run. And he actually gives them money. And he also actually volunteers his time to work with the executive directors. And it can be anything from right now he's really involved in free guitars for kids, the Positive Coaching Alliance, kindness.org. Income inequality is also an area that he is really invested in and wants to research. So he's worked in some of those, inequality org.org, things like that. These are all organizations that he believes in. NaNoWriMo, helping people write novels. We donate money, and then he works with them to improve the overall strategic plan as well.
How did you get into donor advised funds? Like, how do you find out about them? How do you set them up? Like, and then you talked about how you allocate money to it, but how do you start? How did a journey start here?
Yeah. So look, my husband is actually much more, he worked at a nonprofit. He's actually helps nonprofits even spin out of like UC organizations, things like that. So he's very involved in the space and knew a lot about it. So that's why he wanted to move in this direction. He felt like it was the right thing. He also is incredibly frustrated that people actually start DAFs and then they don't donate the money. And so he's even working with folks to look at legislation that might force people to give it away within 3 years after putting it in, things like that. Or that, even foundations need to give away a greater percentage of what they put in. Because the problem, I think, when you actually have a situation where people have put it into foundations, donor advised funds, and they don't give it away, they get the tax break. They also keep it, I think, because they feel like there's a power to it, because the potential of giving it allows them to have power when they're, and we just don't think that's right. Now, as far as getting it started, it's actually quite easy now. When you look at many organizations, I think Fidelity now, a big part of their upside of the profitability of all of Fidelity in their company is actually DAFs, because so much money is pouring into it. Now, it's great that they've made it so easy. It's bad that so much of that money is doing exactly what I was saying we don't like. It's just being parked there. And that's why Fidelity's actually gone so much higher in the money that that they have under management. So it's easy to get it started. I would just encourage people, if you're going to do it, really think about why you're doing it. I love the idea of you got to give it away. That's what it's there for.
I love it. I mean, this is one of the things where, just to be absolutely candid, we hesitated a lot at Arta before starting to explore DApps, because my impression was a lot of people just park the money there. And then, we had a bunch of internal debates, and we're going to open up the ability to create DApps through Arta too. Again, working in partnership with a bunch of people, but I got around to it because, I felt like if we make it much easier then also to donate to different organizations, then we'll encourage people to do it. And, we shouldn't just avoid it just because some people have used it in a way that, we don't like.
I'm so happy to hear what you're saying you're doing, because I was literally going to make feature requests. I'm like, okay, create the DAF, but create this whole atmosphere around it of what you're supposed to do with the DAF and how we can actually make it easy to do the right thing. So yay, good job.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. No, Pooja and I are really big believers in we've been extremely fortunate in life, and there's actually many people who are doing incredible work where I wish we could support them more with our time. Pooja actually does work in nonprofits and social professionally, but even then, it feels like if we can't actually go do work on these causes like children's rights or income inequality is very important to us, then the least we can do is support them.
Yeah, I love hearing that. The fact is, I think nonprofits are in a very tough spot, because first of all, they're always year to year. They have to ask for money year to year. And then when they ask for money, the people actually want to see that they're running so lean that they don't have any of that money for that working capital. And so that's one of the things my husband tries to help with when he's working with the nonprofits, is he'll commit to 3 years of investment or donations, because otherwise the nonprofits can't plan ahead at all. They literally every year they have to start over. And so projects and efforts that should have longer term investment are just very, very hard to fund.
Sabrina, a few closing questions just to wrap things up. And so we'll try to do this as a lightning round. So, and just say whatever comes to the top of your mind. So, if you want to prosper, never underestimate the power of
determination.
That's wonderful. The three key ingredients for a long, fulfilling life are
Family. It's not a word. I would say the happiness, but it's just the decision to be happy, as my son puts it. And community.
That's beautiful. Family, the decision to be happy, and community. And I love it. I love the way you put it. It's because happiness at some level is a decision.
Well,
That
my
is,
son often will say that, and it's he'll always be like the first step to being happy is to decide to be happy.
yeah, that's such a wonderful phrase. I think I'm going to end this podcast on that. The decision to be happy is first just deciding to be happy. Thank you. Thank you so much, Sabrina.
Great to see you.